So what makes you want to get up and keep pushing to do the new technologies and figure out a way to do this cheaper and better?
Let me ask that a different way. How many times in the last how long did you start this? 2 or 3 years ago, approximately?
Yeah, about 3 years ago, yeah.
So how many times in the last 3 years have you woken up and said, "What am I doing? Why did I do this? Right. Do I want to continue?"
I mean 365 days a year, probably. No.
All right, welcome to another episode of Company on the Rise, your place for entrepreneurship in real time. Today we have Tyler Bennett, along with Chris, Becky, Evan, and your host, Christopher Keeney. Today we're going to be talking about startups and pushing through hard times and what keeps you going.
Yeah, so Tyler and I met in a peer group. Man, I'm going to say it shorter than it was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. Is that right?
Honestly, something like that. Yeah, it's probably longer than that, but time's flying, man.
And Tyler's a lot like me, where he has a new idea for a business about every day, and you are the CEO of a generational business, right? 4th generation, is that right?
Yeah, 4th generation.
So that business
started 28.
That's amazing. So that business is called GAR Bennett. He recently merged with a different company, right? So that of about equal size. So tell us a little bit about what GAR Bennett does, and then we'll get into the startup one.
Yeah. So our family business been around for 90 plus years. We do on-farm drip irrigation, any type of water conservation. We're in the west of the United States, so it's very dry out here right now. So we have a lot of farms looking to conserve water. So that's basically what we do there. We also sell them fertilizer and chemicals and do all sorts of, crop care, crop management type activities. And so we're really, our tagline is, more crop with less water. And so that's really what we're shooting for. So as water's getting tight, crop production drops. We try to maintain crop production and increase it with especially the water as far as we can. I mean, that's pretty much what we do in a little soundbite there.
Nice.
And yeah, so it's a big business out in California, and they 4th generation is very, very impressive. And then he started another business called Bennett Environmental, and that I'll let you explain it way better than I do, because my terms won't sound good on the air.
Yeah, no worries. No, Bennett Environmental is a renewable energy business. So we take wastewater and we capture methane, and we upgrade the gas and make it pipeline quality and inject it into a pipeline, a utility pipeline, and that it flows through the utility pipeline and goes to a dispensing station owned by large, oil and gas companies, and then they dispense it into a CNG vehicle, and the whole process is intended to take a diesel engine off the road and replace it with a CNG truck that's much cleaner. So you're capturing methane and greenhouse gases on the front end, and then you're also upgrading that gas, putting it into a pipeline, running it through so that a dispensary owned by BP or Chevron or Shell, those types of companies, they can actually dispense that into a CNG truck and take a diesel truck off the road. So yeah, it's a green business. It's renewable energy business, and it's interesting that the outlook for it is real promising. The biggest challenge has been it's a very, very complicated business with lots of people involved along the way. You have a utility pipeline, you have an oil and gas company. We're a startup on this end, out at the dairies on the farms, which is what we normally are doing on a daily basis. So yeah, it takes a while to get these projects going, but it's also, because the energy is renewable, it's worth a lot more than just, say, a normal fossil fuel well that will pump gas out of the ground. So, you have carbon credit markets, both a federal market and a state market. And those carbon credits are purchased by the big oil and gas companies to sort of offset some polluting activities that they have. They have to buy these carbon credits, and that's what we sell.
I think it's interesting that Tyler had these two businesses, while both kind of environmental, because one's about water conservation and one's about green energy, but operationally probably couldn't be more different as far as fourth generation, very sustained, very good market share, very large, and so doesn't move. Probably, I'm going to guess, Tyler probably doesn't move at the speed of light because of the size of the company. And then you have the Bennett Environmental startup that has to pivot about every day, I would imagine, at this point.
No, you're exactly right. I always joke with my wife. I'm like, hey, our family business, which is GAR Bennett, that seems like it's on autopilot. It's on cruise control, and there's problems there, but because you have such a large team, it doesn't all fall on the same 3 or 4 people to solve everything. And when you're in a startup, it's really a lot different. Everything has to be done by the same small team, and you end up wearing so many different hats that you just feel that when you walk in the door that day, you have no idea what your day is going to look like. Where at GAR Bennett, I can walk in and kind of walk in the morning and go, okay, hey, what do I want to do today? What do I want to work on today? Right. And you don't have that luxury in a startup. It's like, what do we absolutely have to do today to get through this week? And then we'll see what next week brings. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart, the startup.
What was it that made you want to start with the startup, the Bennett Environmental?
Besides insanity.
Insanity, craziness. No, I think, it's about seeing an opportunity and feeling like you can help your customers with something that they can't solve themselves. And I also think it's about doing something good for the environment. So there's kind of a dual purpose there. And so our customers had 3 major challenges that didn't really fit entirely into the GAR Bennett spectrum of lines of business. And so we said, why don't we carve out a new company called Bennett Environmental that will go after something that we had never done before, which was renewable energy. So we've always been water people. We've dealt with wastewater. We've dealt with, water conservation, water conveyance, water pumping, all those types of things. But the renewable energy piece was different. But the dairies had 3 problems. One was the state of California came out and said, look, by 2030, we want to reduce the methane going up into the air by 40% in the dairy industry. So all the dairies were like, well, how do we do that?
That's a big number.
What's methane? Right? Because you can't see it. It's just going up in the air. So it was, that was step number 1, was helping them to figure out how to do that. Step number 2 was they have a lot of nitrates coming off of any animal agricultural facility, and those nitrates can trickle down into the groundwater and affect pregnant women if the nitrate level is too high in your tap water. It's not good for pregnant women. It causes blue baby syndrome. So a lot of the issues around the country with water quality have to do with too many nitrates or too much phosphorus. And on the East Coast, it's phosphorus. On the West Coast, it's nitrates, which is a problem. So, we have to have a water treatment system. And Bennett Environmental also had a system does have a system that will tackle that. And then the third thing is where GAR Bennett fit in, which is, okay, once your water is cleaner coming off an animal agricultural facility, you've got to spread that water over so many acres of land by law. And so they're going to need drip irrigation to help spread that wastewater around and grow crops with it. So that's where GAR Bennett came in. And so we were looking at it as originally a drip irrigation play and water, conveyance play for GAR Bennett. But we said, if we can't just solve that issue and leave these other 2 issues hanging out there, because they're all connected as part of a dairy. So in looking at that, we said, okay, well, we feel really good about the second part, the water treatment. But the first part, methane capture and gas, we don't really know anything about renewable energy. And that doesn't really fit the risk-return profile of GAR Bennett. So let's spin that out. Renewable energy is very popular. It looks like an exciting industry to be in. And so we just went for it. And so we're learning about it. I got a great partner who's a civil engineer and worked at a regional engineering firm. And so I convinced him to join up. We had been working together on a consulting basis prior to starting Bennett Environmental, thinking about these three issues and how we might solve them. And so we took a trip to Israel. I convinced them to jump on a plane and go to Israel and look for technologies that could solve these three issues: methane capture, water treatment, and drip irrigation. We already had really the first two. And so we went to Israel and we interviewed three different companies out of originally a group of 80 that we had identified that could have technologies already in existence that were commercially available that could solve these issues. And so that's how it all got started. And it was a crazy idea. You know, I found myself leaving the comforts of this big team and deciding that I'm going to fly to Israel, search for technologies. Never been to Israel before. Just felt like that was the wastewater capital of the world. They recycle everything. You know, they have very, very tight water supply and a lot of demand. And so we went there to really kind of see what we could find. And we found something that was pretty cool. Came back, and that's kind of how the whole thing got started. Formed the company around that technology, and here we are today, pivoting. We've pivoted away from that technology actually because we found something better. That's how it got started, and it's been a lot of fun, but very different than what I'm used to. And I guess I am a little crazy to leave the comfort zone of the big team.
Yeah. So what makes you want to get up and keep pushing to do the new technologies and figure out a way to do this cheaper and better?
Let me ask that a different way. How many times in the last, how long did you start this? 2 or 3 years ago, approximately?
Yeah, about 3 years ago. Yeah.
So how many times in the last 3 years have you woken up and said, "What am I doing? Why did I do this? Right. Do I want to continue?"
I mean, 365 days a year, probably. You know, a lot. I think you can, you know, if you stay in the zone of where you are at that moment, sometimes it can be very disheartening, right? And you have to kind of bring yourself back up to, why are we doing this in the first place? You know, and we're doing this to make an economic return, sure, but we're also doing this to help our customers that we've had generational relationships with. And we're also doing it because animal agriculture, we feel, can do things cleaner and better without putting all of the financial burden on the backs of these dairymen, some of which are small family businesses. So we just felt like, you know, the mission, we really believe in the mission. And we believe in, you know, realizing an economic return for our investors is important. We believe in providing a good place to work is important. And we really do. This is a big issue for California. I mean, California has a lot of bad air quality because we have 40 million people living here now. I mean, it's a beautiful place. It's very crowded. And our air quality is not great. We've had fires. We've had all kinds of problems. And, you know, we hope that we can be a piece of the solution and the future that will be a cleaner future for California. And we know that, you know, the dairy industry and other animal agricultural industries have serious issues, not things they've done on purpose. It's just been by the nature of what they do. And so we have technology now that we can really help out. And so if you forget about that, you can get lost in the fact that, hey, today we're really dealing with an issue of, you know, something that is a fire drill, but really in the big picture, when you look back at it, you'll forget you even had that fire drill. But it's very disheartening at that moment. You know, it's very you're grinding through it. You can't think about anything else. Somebody's calling you and yelling at you for some reason, you know, and you're in that moment and it just isn't comfortable. Right. And so you kind of have to bring yourself back up to, why are we doing this in the first place? And remind yourself and trust that you're going to get there eventually. You know, there's a lot of trust, a lot of faith that we're going to get to where we need to be eventually. And it may not be exactly clear how we're going to get there at this moment, but we trust each other as a team, and we have the right vision, the right model, and you got to just have a lot of faith and keep charging. It's tough at sometimes, but that's, if you don't have that, you'll never make it.
So I think one of the differences between I haven't run a business as quite as large as Tyler's, but much bigger than a startup, and I think one of the differences, Tyler, between the GAR Bennett side and the Bennett Environmental startup side is what you said, is that in the startup mode in GAR Bennett there are more problems in GAR Bennett, you just don't see them because other people take care of them. Right. And
exactly.
And on the startup side, you see every problem, and every problem, not every problem, but a lot of those problems are company killer problems because you're so small.
Yeah.
And so you have to act on every one of them. And I think that's just the big difference between this mentality that we've talked about here and Tyler's talking about how you have to really believe in the mission, because if you do not, you're going to quit. And you have to believe that what you're doing is the right thing, and that you can be successul at it. And because it can get emotionally draining. I think Tyler's been there. I mean, we've had conversations before, and I think he's been there, and I've been there at times where you're like, man, I what was I thinking?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's been days I woke up and I'm like, holy crap, man, why am I doing it? And it's you're at the point where you're like, I don't even know if I can go in and read emails today, because it's just what else is going to happen? You know, what else is going to come at me, right? And there's curveballs coming in all the time, and sometimes, you know, you're getting 10 curveballs a day. Other days you don't get any curveballs, but those days when you do, it gets low. And friends in life and community are so huge, because sometimes with unsolicited, I'd get a call and someone would say, hey, I'm going to come see you. Or, hey, I'm going to, let's talk. I know you're going through something right now. Let's talk about, I've been there, you know, and those types of things are what help get you through. You know, if you're on an island and you're by yourself, it can, and has many entrepreneurs, it's just worn them down, and they just say, hey, look, I never want to do a startup or be in business ever again. I think I'll go do something completely different, because it's so painful.
And that's where I think a lot of these peer groups, and Tyler and I met in a peer group, I think that's part of, you know, it is the support group of friends and family, but also I think it's, you know, a lot of times your friends, for the most part, and family haven't been through, they don't know what you're going through because they haven't done this. And that's where the peer group kind of really helps out in that, because a lot of those people have been in your shoes before and know what you're going through and can really say, man, hang in there. Because it's I know it feels like the world's ending, but it's not.
No, yeah, there was a moment where, you know, we had a private equity firm that we were really far down the line with. I mean, it had been, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of due diligence, and they're just looking at us and turning over every rock. And, you know, through that process, our small team, we learned, you know, we really don't like these guys very much. You know, they've got money, but they're, you know, they keep moving the goalpost, and, you know, they're just really hard to deal with. And we're like, man, this, you know, if we, you know, consummate this marriage, this is going to be a long relationship, and we're going to have to deal with these people for a very long time. But as a startup, you know, you need cash. So you're always managing cash and watching that. And so you're thinking, man, how painful is it if I get rid of these guys and start the process completely over? And I was at a point where I couldn't even contemplate starting over, because I was so tired and so drained emotionally. And so I had a mutual friend from our peer group that Chris and I are in, and she flew out and she coached me up. She stayed here for a week, and she said, you're not going to take that deal with those guys. You don't like these people. They're not going to be good partners for you. And I was like, yeah, but I can't start over. And she's like, yeah, you can, you know, but I was not in a mental capacity where I could make the right decision, which was to start over with somebody new. But I just couldn't fathom even doing that, because I had invested so much time and so much energy, and I was drained. And I needed that person that understood where I was, and the team of people on my peer group that could really understand what I was going through. And I needed them to give me words of encouragement and say, no, you can actually do this.
Wow, that value can't be calculated. That's awesome.
Yeah, it can't. And honestly, I would have made a really bad decision probably. I mean, by the way, if you look at my history, it's littered with bad decisions. Okay. I mean, I have a few good ones in there, but there's a lot of bad decisions, but if you learn from them, you're okay. But this particular point, I was really, really down, deflated and exhausted. And it had been a long process. And this group was kind of, whether they were negotiating or whether they were just jerks, they would find something and they'd make you feel like, oh man, you just don't know what you're talking about, and for a team of small people to hear that as a startup, it's really deflating because your vision is there, your work product is there, the effort that you've gone through, and there's someone on the other end saying, it's just not that valuable, And we disagreed, but the thought of starting over with a new group and potentially maybe hearing the same thing was just daunting. And so I was rescued in a sense by my peer group, and Chris was very supportive, and our mutual friend Pam, she was very supportive, and others, and it really made a big difference. And I could not have probably made that decision without her flying out here and spending a week with me to really, just convince me everything was going to be okay. Look, we're gonna get through this. Okay, we're gonna switch. We're gonna find somebody better. You've got lots of term sheets, lots of people that want to talk to you. And I said, okay. And we found the energy, and we just found the way to do it. And it was, I don't know how we found the way to do it, but we did. And it was the right decision, and feeling much better today about everything than we ever have, quite honestly. And so, but yeah, it was, the peer group was extremely valuable. I'd highly recommend that for anyone, is that you have to have people that understand where you are. And with anything in life, really. I mean, if you're having, if you have something that's going on in your life and you're really having a hard time dealing with it, if nobody's ever gone through that and they're trying to coach you up, it's not really the right coaching. It's usually got to be somebody that's got that experience.
Thanks for listening. We had to cut it short. The conversation continues for another half hour approximately. So tune in next week to hear the rest of the conversation with Tyler and GAR Bennett. And he is going to go over bankruptcy. He's going to go over how he deals with pressure. Lots of other good stuff in there. So tune in next week. Follow us on podcasts, subscribe, all the good stuff, YouTube. Check out our website, companyontherise.com. Almost said the wrong website. Tune in next week. Join us. Lots of fun. I can't hear it.
It's right there.
Can you hear me now?
You should hear people now.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
We got you.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, this is Chris with Company on the Rise podcast. Make sure to subscribe to hear more.